6, 5, 4, 3. Welcome to FAQ Friday. It's Andrew Beach, Executive Career Coach. Access the chat to enter any questions you might have. We're just waiting for a handful of people to join to get started. If you're joining on LinkedIn, I'd be happy to hear what you have got going on. What are some questions that you have? We have some free trainings, yes, available on the website. We'll get to that in just a second. Welcome everyone. It's Andrew Beach, Executive Career Coach. I help professionals communicate their value to find great new jobs faster, whether they're working or not. Today on FAQ Friday, we want to hear all of your great questions in the chat. It's over on the side here. I'm happy to answer any questions about resume, networking, market planning, interviewing, whatever that looks like. If you have a question, I am happy to answer any concern that you have about career and your professional future. We have a number of topics today that we're going to talk about. I'd appreciate understanding how you're joining us today. We're coming to you live actually from a number of different places, including Periscope, Facebook, LinkedIn Live, hey LinkedIn, and YouTube. So whatever platform you're on, go ahead and leave me a message there. Use the hashtags, they're on the screen. Hashtag RedQuorama. It's very easy for me to find that one because nobody else is using it. Or FAQ Friday. So those hashtags will allow me to find your questions and answer them. So please use those when you come to the chat, or if you're on LinkedIn, that's where I spend most of my time. So the LinkedIn Live will be available for you. A couple of themes that came up this week in my coaching interactions. Several of the people that I'm working with have been known as one thing, right? I do work in, let's say, X, and I want to do work in Y. And whatever that looks like, it's something totally outside of their domain. And they have a challenge understanding, how do I bridge where I'm at to get to where I want to be? And it's not uncommon that you feel unqualified, full of doubt. I don't have the qualifications or the experience or the education. I have all these limitations that prevent me from doing that kind of work. Now, I could leave in the chat here. I'll do that here. I found an article that talks a lot about the idea of qualifications. And I'll put that in the chat here on LinkedIn, as well as in the chat board on the other profiles here, so that you can have a copy of that. What it said was, and this is interesting, by the way, that if you have somewhere around 55% of the qualifications for any job, then you're getting interviews at the same rate as somebody who has 90% qualifications. Let me say that again. If you only have half the qualifications, you're getting an interview at the same rate as someone who has about 90% qualifications. What does that mean? That means that the hiring teams perceive on paper that if you have at least half the requirements, they're going to consider you for that job because they recognize you're going to grow into that job. You'll be dedicated to that job. You'll actually have something to learn there. If you have 90% requirements, you only have 10% room to learn anything. That's the challenge. So I encourage each one of you, if you're looking at something new or something better, don't think that you're not qualified for that role. Think that you're qualified for that role if you have about half of the requirements or the qualifications they're looking for. Not uncommon that you might come into a situation and say, okay, I've got experience in project management and leading teams, but I haven't really led a whole organization through a strategic process. So I'm good at the operational side of things, but I'm not really experienced in setting strategy. Well, that's okay. I mean, you've seen it secondhand enough people developing strategy to know how to execute it. So I don't think that's a huge bridge to cross. Now, in your mind, it might be. I can think back of several times in my own career where I asked myself, can I? Can I say, do this coaching thing? So I'm building a coaching practice. I've been doing that now for almost 5 years. And it's a lot of work. But the idea here is no different, is that I always ask myself, can I do that? And what I realized over the years is I need to ask myself a better question. The question is, how can I do that? How can I take what I want to do and earn the living that I'm getting now? How can I do what I want to do and still have the same benefits, the 401k, the health insurance, all those things, right? That as an independent business owner, we don't typically have access to. And so you have to look at the variables and ask yourself, how can I make that happen? Not, can I make that happen? So there's that one thing that you might think about changing in terms of the way you position yourself that might actually get you better results. Rather than say, can you, it's how can you? And I think you'll get a lot better results out of that process. Hey, Mike Towery, good to have you in the house. Good to see you, my friend. It's been a while. Anybody who needs, by the way, help with mortgages, a good friend of mine, Mike Towery's in the chat. Happy to showcase and give you props, Mike. You're an exceptional human being. Phil, good to have you as well. Welcome back through to the LinkedIn live session here. The other thing I noticed today and this is just me talking to me. A lot of this live is probably me talking to me, but the idea is even as I'm building my coaching practice or even coaching my clients that are looking for promotions or even trying to get a job if they're not working, is the voices. Now, not only are there voices in your head, but there's voices like me in the marketplace. So you're going to talk to people or see articles on LinkedIn about how to write the perfect resume, or the 10 things to avoid, or the 5 things you should absolutely do, or here's the 10 mistakes you should always not pursue, right? So that what you're hearing is a lot of different voices, and sometimes it's hard to know which is true and which one's going to get me results. And I encourage you to take a listen to some of those voices and then decide which ones actually resonate with you, and then just stick with that one voice until you've actually done something with what they're talking about. So for example, in my business, there's a lot of people that talk about how to create an educational webinar and how to turn that webinar into maybe the back end of that would have some sort of sales offer. And there's lots of people teaching this, how to build the perfect webinar. And then there's also people out there how to build the perfect online course, which are two things that I'm really passionate about learning right now. That I've listened to all the voices, and sometimes I get to a point where you listen to so many voices, you don't know what to do. And so what I've done is I've said, okay, if I'm looking in this space, let's say it's webinar, and I've listened to all the voices and I found one of them that resonates with me, I'm going to stick with that person, execute what they're telling me, and see if it works. So here's the same thing for job search. If you know that there's someone out there that as a coach or a guidance or a northern light, so to speak, take a look at what they have to say, execute on it. If it works, keep doing it, right? Or keep listening to that person, keep taking their advice. That's the beauty of LinkedIn, is you have the opportunity here to meet a lot of really good people. So if you're here and you're on LinkedIn or any of the other channels that I'm broadcasting, please, by all means, leave me a question related to your career, anything related to interviews or market planning or resume or any of that information that you want. I'm happy to answer your questions. Elena, good to have you. Happy Friday. It's happy hour, right? It's 3 o'clock. I think people on the West Coast can understand 3 o'clock. I think it's 3 to 6. Most establishments have happy hour. So I want to say, hey, it's Friday, it's happy hour. There's a lot of people out there maybe looking for something better in their career. And I want you to spread the word. Let them know that we're here to answer any questions live every Friday at 3 p.m. Share it with your network. In fact, if you're on LinkedIn, go out to your network and share this live stream with your network. I think it's super easy to do. Let me see if there's a way to do that. I don't see it here. Maybe it's down at the bottom of the screen. So you'll see the little thumbs up and then the clappy hands. Well, right next to that, just to the left of that, is something that says share. So I would encourage you to share the live stream with your network, and let's get some more people in here. Let's have some fun. Let's ask some questions. Go ahead and access the chat. Put in your question about your career, anything that you have in terms of interviewing, market planning, networking. I'm happy to answer. Okay. So let's see. Creating a comfortable yes. I think that's a topic that was from last week. And so I'm not going to expound on that. I didn't remove it from my slide deck, so I apologize. But listening to the voices, just pick the one that sounds the best to you. So that's something that I would think about. Just a reminder, I do have a podcast. It's called jobseekersradio.com. I'll put that in the chat as well. And we just released a new episode. There was a number of questions that we had gotten oops, I think I misspelled it. Sorry about that. I'll fix that right now. That we had gotten, Scott Picard and I do this together. So it's one of those things that we did a bunch of question and answer. And one of the questions that we had found coming up over and over again is, how many times is applying to a company too many times? Is there a limit to that? Should I be doing more? Should I be doing less? And so just think about that. We have the podcast. We answered a bunch of questions over there, and happy to answer your questions here today about resume, LinkedIn, whatever it takes. I'm happy to answer. So that's the first thing. New podcast episode. We just released it on Wednesday, episode 058. So go ahead, subscribe to the podcast, take advantage of the resource that we make available to you for free. The other thing is I just published a new article here on LinkedIn, and let me go ahead and share that. It's about, I think the title was, where is it? The number one reason you won't get a promotion. And it was just something fun that I was playing around with, is this idea of actually see all articles. I'll get it off of the platform here and actually share it with you. Let me click on that. Here we go. Because what I'm finding is people are thinking that, I'll put it in the chat there, and then I'll go over here and put it in the chat as well. What's happening? Well, here's what's happening, is that a lot of people out there are stuck in career neutral, and they're in a company, they're performing well, they're probably likely paid pretty well, and so they're satisfied. They're not looking for anything better. And yet when they have an opportunity to go ahead and maybe elevate their position in the company, they haven't laid the groundwork for that. I see that even in my career, way in the early days, is I thought that my work would speak for itself. And yes, it did to my immediate manager, right? But it didn't speak to anybody else in the organization. So the only person that really noticed were the people that I worked with in my inner circle. And that doesn't do well for me if I'm looking to elevate in the organization. I need to invest some time, energy, and attention to those people in my network inside the company or outside, so that I can have a possibility, a potential, an opportunity to get a promotion. And so go ahead and read and share that article. I think it's wonderful. Excellent. Kathy, good to have you. Yes, so if you're in the chat, go ahead and leave any questions you have about career, resume, LinkedIn, interviewing, market planning, that sort of thing. Yes, Kathy, my pleasure. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask. I'm here to answer. So we're broadcasting live today, actually, on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Periscope. So wherever you're joining from, go ahead and ask your questions. Ask away. Happy to answer. Yes, hi Kathy. Good to have you. We're just going to be going for a few more minutes here. We've been broadcasting now about 15 minutes. Looks like there's about 9 people on the stream. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put them down. Ask away. Glad to have you. Any plans for the weekend? Any plans? Well, here's a good question. If you're in Portland, Oregon, where's a great place on the west side to watch a football game? Public place. West side, football game. Looking for a great place to watch NFL game, by the way, not college. So if you have that information, I'd be happy to know about it. That would be an ask from my side. So if there's no questions, though, we might just go ahead and sign off and call it a day. And I pray you have a good weekend and that you take some time today to hang with family and build meaningful connection with people. Okay? Any questions, go ahead and leave those in the chat. I'll check over here on my other. All right, folks. Well, I hope you have a great weekend. Thank you again for joining me on this FAQ Friday. I'm here every Friday, 3 p.m. Pacific time. Spread the word. I'm here to answer any career questions that you have. I consider this, kind of a free coaching session. Kathy, finally, a question. Thank you. What do you suggest you do when recruiters state they will get back to you by a specific date and they don't? What follow-up do you recommend? Couple things. One, that's not about you. So recognize in your mind that there's something that they're having to deal with, and whatever that might look like, they're dealing with a lot of different requisitions. They have a caseload, a workload that they have to get through. And so that's really not about you. I would encourage you a couple things. One is that that's not the only person in the organization you likely need to be developing relationships with. Is that if you're interested in that company, what they're doing, then go talk to people about the company and what they're doing. That has nothing to do, by the way, you might have noticed, I didn't say go talk to them about the job you applied for. I said go talk to them about the company and what they're doing. How did they get to where they are in their career, right? So the more consultative, questions-focused approach to the networking inside the organization is going to give you a greater perspective on what's happening there. Now, I recognize that some companies have policies, albeit they're probably not good policies, where if you go around the hiring process, you'll be excluded. So take everything I say with a grain of salt. If this is a company you've gone far down the path with, then you probably want to tread lightly. And so if that's the case, use your best judgment. And I would say if I'm following up with the same person over and over again, I would probably do it different ways. I wouldn't hit the email every time. I wouldn't hit the LinkedIn message every time. I might send snail mail, an actual handwritten letter. I might cut out an article from a magazine and mail it to them. I might send them an email. Yes, I might leave them a voicemail. I'm going to use many different methods to get with them, but I'm not going to do that every day. I might do that every 72 hours. So let's say, just hypothetical, I interviewed today. I would follow up with them in probably Tuesday next week to figure out next steps. But I'm not going to leave an interview unless I know what the next steps are. So make sure you identify that. But I'm going to follow up with Tuesday, and then maybe Friday, and then maybe the following Wednesday, right? So that you have maybe a 3-day cadence after an interview until you get an answer. Okay? And I would do that probably for about 30 days. So 3-day cadence for 30 days. And then after that, once a month. Because they have a process, they could have pulled that requisition. There's so many things that are unrelated to you. Okay? Now, the best advice I ever got, and this is coming from a sales guy, is that when you generate, you won't tolerate. Now, what does that mean in the job search world? That means if you're generating many opportunities, you won't tolerate people that won't get back to you, that turn you down, that say no, that tell you you're not the right fit. Why? Because I've got 10 more just like it. Okay? So if we have enough activity, recognize that our mindset's going to be stronger. I would encourage you, regardless of what's happening with that opportunity, that one recruiter, go find another one. Okay. Realize what got me to that spot. What got me to the point where I'm interacting with this person, had an interview, and it looks really good? What got me there? Okay. It might have been an application. Is that repeatable? Can I duplicate that in another opportunity? Okay. So good stuff. Elena's got a question. Interviewing on Monday. Congratulations. I'm sure you're going to spend all weekend getting ready. Would like to summarize my brain to answer the tell me about yourself question briefly. Good. Yeah, absolutely. Script that out. Practice it. If you got a neighbor, a friend, even your voicemail, speak it into your voicemail. Do it into a camera. If you have a webcam, your many phones now can allow you to record things. Okay. I'm practicing all weekend. Now, recognize too, if you're interviewing on Monday, that's probably, and if it's Monday morning, it's one, suspicion, 80% going to be rescheduled. Okay. People get sick. They come off a weekend. Stuff happens. All right. There's something that'll probably be a little bit more important than your interview. So it really just depends on whether or not you're interviewing with HR or with the operations team, right? The people that you'd actually be working for. And if that's in HR, then certainly HR interviews is important. So I would certainly practice my socks off, recognizing who it is I'm meeting with. What are they likely wanting to know about me? What experiential stories do I have that include texture? The reason I say texture is I think a lot of people think and react to stories and emotion. And that's typically done when you have visual storytelling. You use word pictures, okay? That you're using things to draw people in. And so that's what I would encourage you to do. Write out some stories, practice them, use word pictures so that people feel like they're part of the story, that they were actually there, that they can see you in the story being successful. And that'll certainly draw them in. So that's the first thing I would do. I'd practice all weekend and make sure I got my stories down, because if you're worried about the words, you're not going to perform well, meaning you're not going to deliver well, because words, if you look at communication, are only about 6% of the equation. 6% of communication is the words you use. It's not very much. And yet that's the thing we as interviewees are always most concerned about, is the words. So I would not be concerned about the words. I'd be concerned about the delivery and make sure the words are something that come natural for you, and practice. And it is the weekend, but I can assure you there's likely a Toastmasters group out there that you could visit even on the weekends, because many of the people that are in Toastmasters, guess what? They don't have time to do it during the week. So there's a lot of opportunities for people to get engaged with Toastmasters on the weekends. Okay. So that's a couple of ideas. What's the third idea? I had something else. I was going to share it with you. So a technique, and I talk about this a lot on the podcast and some on my website. You'll see it. I call it the AAA technique, and this is something we all need to get experience executing on. AAA meaning they ask a question. That's the first A. Okay, so in an interview, you're asked a question. The second A is answer the question using a story. Okay, so they ask, you answer. And then the third pillar is ask a similar related question back. So the one I always like to use is the tell me about yourself question. That comes at the front end of just about every interview that our candidates or our clients have ever participated in. Something related to an icebreaker. That's an opportunity for you to share your branding message. And so it's like a verbal cover letter. So you deliver that, but at the end of that message, you should have another question back to them. Okay. So they say, tell me about yourself. You answer the question, and then you come back to them with something like, hey, I read the job description. Tell me more about what the ideal candidate for this role looks like. And be ready to take notes. Would it be okay if I take notes? And at the front end of the interview, what are they going to give you? All the things that they think they need in that role. So then you can tailor your answers to what you think they need based on what they told you. And you've engaged that person in the interaction. So ask question from the interviewer, answer question from the interviewer, Ask similar related question back. It's a technique I think we all can use to draw the interview teams in. Okay. You're welcome, Elena. I'm happy to do it. Looks like my sidekick is here, my office mate. So good. Thanks for all those questions in there. Yeah, Kathy, I appreciate that. I don't want to be a pest either. And so often we end up knocking on the same doors over and over again, expecting a different result. I won't tell you what that's the definition of, but it's something not so good. And so I would encourage you to not knock on the same doors over and over again. Find a new door. Don't knock as frequently. Okay. Maybe even go to a different building. Knock on doors there. Okay. So those are some keys that I think are really helpful to a lot of people. Stay engaged with people that have a pulse, a heartbeat, that have opportunity to share advice and information. I think that's key. That's critical to success of any job seeker. Okay. Grace and David, good to see you. Thanks for coming into the stream. If you have any questions about career, LinkedIn, resume, interviewing, market planning, sales, been in sales a long time, happy to answer. Richard, welcome. Good to have you. Thanks for coming in. Here's an interesting question. Great podcast and thank you. With the resume in Times New Roman font acceptable or the standard fonts? Yes, I encourage people, just as a side note, I don't think that the resume personally is a definitive tool to use for job search. I think you are your best resume. You are your best cover letter. You are the best version of you. To encapsulate you into a two-dimensional piece of paper is not natural. Okay? So we have to first put resume in perspective. It is a tool, yes, and yes, it may be necessary, but no, I don't believe quality of resume equals quality of hire or quality of resume equals quality of experience. Okay? It's just a communicated two-dimensional representation of your past. That being said, I recognize that many people are concerned about that product that you put out. So I'm a fan of formatting light. I don't like a lot of special formatting, special fonts, shading. Just go with a simple resume because truthfully, the person that's going to review that and put you in the big stack or the short stack, right? You know where the big stack goes, right? Goes in the round file. Short stack goes to the hiring manager, okay? The ones that go to the short stack are the ones that are easiest to read because you only have 8 seconds to make a first impression. So Times New Roman, sure, okay? If it's not getting you calls for interviews, you know you're not getting to the short stack. That means you need to change the formatting or change the method of finding interviews. Okay, so if you're not getting the results you want, take that to heart. Can you use action present terms for past jobs like reporting to the manager? Similarly or similarly collaborative. Okay, I'm not sure what you're asking there. Richard, if you could be more specific. If you need help with resume, I have somebody that's fantastic. Send me a private message. Happy to connect you with somebody who's really good at resume. Okay. I can do resumes, but I choose not to because I don't think it's an effective tool. Just personal opinion. And I'm willing to die on that hill. Yes. Okay. What are your pet peeves? Is that a good question to ask the interviewer? No, I don't think I'd ask that of an interviewer. I would have it something related to the job, your experience, and the question they asked you. Okay. So for example, maybe they ask you a behavioral question, tell me about your weakness. Okay. So that the weakness question comes up a lot. I'm not a fan of it because I think it's silly. I don't want to, and that may be an indicator of the corporate values of that organization, but that's the story for another day. I want to leverage strength. And so if I get a weakness question, I'm going to answer that question, but then I'm going to ask something back. Okay. Something related to that question. How can I leverage my strengths in these areas rather than focus on my weakness? Okay. And so that's where I'd ask them, are these kind of strengths valid for this role? And how will I get to use them in this role? And so not only are they seeing you in the role, they're telling you how you're going to be successful in that role. I think that's huge. Okay. So that's not something I would, pet peeves. I don't think that's something I would maybe ask of a hiring team. That might be a little challenging. Okay. Yep. Thank you, Richard. Appreciate you coming in. Grace and David, thank you. Appreciate you. Again, I'm here every Friday, 3 p.m. Pacific time. Let all your friends and family know, all your network on LinkedIn. Happy to answer any questions about your career, market planning, resume, although I don't think it's an effective tool. It is something that might be necessary in this process. I just want it to be administrative, okay? I want you to actually get through a hiring process, get the offer, and then you submit your application resume to HR the day you start work. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but if you held that as a goal, an objective, a potential possibility, it could happen. Okay, it could happen. It happens probably more frequently than you can imagine. Even in the era of compliance and risk and equal employment opportunity, it isn't always the best person that gets hired, meaning the most qualified person. And so there's two components to people getting hired. One is qualifications, yes. So if you don't have the qualifications, you're not having the conversation in the first place. And the second thing is trust, okay? Qualifications and trust. So if you don't have those two ingredients, you're likely not a finalist, okay? If you have qualifications but no trust, that means you have to interview well to build that trust. And if your first time you're meeting that hiring team is at the interview, that puts you at a disadvantage, okay? Huge disadvantage. So I'd encourage you to do anything you can to get in front of hiring teams before they actually have a hiring process executed. Okay. Yeah, it may never work, but private household management couple for high net worth successful families. Yeah, I mean, I understand it's not for everybody. And yes, you may have to go through a process, but trust is still part of that process. People aren't going to hire you unless they trust you, right? And so if they don't trust you, may not hire you. Okay. All right, folks. Well, I'm going to sign off. It's now 3:30. We've been on here at least half an hour. I do appreciate you attending, providing me with some questions, and I hope you find everything you're looking for in a short period of time. Take care, everybody. Have a great weekend.